Hello and welcome to the NISFA Open Doors Film Panel Series. I'm Professor Jeffrey Wisotsky and we're coming to you live from the studios of Bronx Community College. It's a great time to be a film student in New York State. Thanks to Governor Cuomo's highly successful production tax credit program, New York's film industry is growing and thriving, and that means new production-related jobs are being created every day. Today on the program, we're talking to a distinguished panel of casting directors. We will discuss how innovative software and technology has changed the way film projects are cast and how their companies can help you with your casting needs. Besides me is Allison Hall, casting director at Grant Wilfley Casting. Next is Maribeth Fox, casting director at Laura Rosenthal Casting, and Courtney Shea, manager of client relations at Casting Networks. Welcome to the program. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Our film students in the audience and the students watching this program online, they want to know the story of how each of you began your career into casting. How did you get started in the industry, and what made you choose casting? And we'll start with Allison.
So I started in the theater world. I was a theater major in South Florida, and one of my professors was represented by a company that I ended up being an intern for. And then just ended up getting hired by a print and commercial agency in Boca, Florida. Through them, I knew I wanted to move to New York, and I met just some people who worked here, and they put me in touch with an agent who I ended up working for when I moved here. I worked for her for about 5 years, and I realized I wanted to be on the other side of it in casting, and just changed over, and I've been working for Grant for almost 15 years now. So
cool. Maribeth?
Yeah.
Well, I came to New York to go to Fordham University here in the Bronx from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and knew I wanted to be a part of the entertainment industry somehow. And I interned a lot. I interned at Sesame Street and NBC, but the most important internship I had was at a little boutique talent agency who used interns as assistants for the summers. And so I knew how to do that job. And so then when I graduated from college, I started at an agency. And that's where I learned how to talk to actors, and that I liked working with them, but that I just wanted to spend 5 to 10 minutes with them, not more time with them. And I really liked talking to the casting directors on the other end of the phone. And so I made the switch, and I worked for CBS primetime casting for a little while. And now I've been working for Laura Rosenthal for 12 years after I started with her on an 8-week film job.
Courtney?
So for me, casting was not on my radar at all. I went to film school, didn't know exactly what I wanted to track on, like if it was producing or directing. And internships are super important. My advisor at the time encouraged me to intern at a casting office. We did cast for background for One Tree Hill, and I loved it. Kind of got that office taste, but I also was able to, go to set and help check in people on set. So that led me to get another internship out in LA, working and helping with the whole casting process for Pretty Little Liars. And again, absolutely loved that. So it really just, that molded it for me, was the internships. And then I got a job at a casting office here in New York at Central Casting New York, which is also background actors, or casting for background actors. Loved that, but I really started to want to get to know the business side of things, as well as kind of that office job and like sales. And that's what led me to Casting Networks, where I've been here for about 5 years now.
Thank you. Allison, this is for you. Yes. What is SAG and AFTRA? And how does a film student find background for a non-union film or TV project?
Okay, so SAG is Screen Actors Guild. It recently, well, now it's been about 5 years, merged with AFTRA, so it is SAG AFTRA. So as far as background goes, we use SAG background every day. What was the second part of your question? Yeah, I don't want to veer off.
But how does a film student find background for a non-union film?
So I'm sure Courtney will go into it too, but a lot of it's done online today. You can set up accounts with Backstage or Breakdown Services or Casting Networks. We even, because we look a lot for real people, we do it on social media. and we reach out. So there's a ton of ways to get background from just social media, and then there's also platforms set up through casting networks and, you know, different websites specifically that you can set up an account for.
So Allison, does getting into one union mean you're eligible to join the other union?
Not necessarily. All the unions have different requirements. SAG AFTRA is a very specific union with specific requirements that I'm happy to go into about how you can sort of do that when doing background work. Sort of a process to do that.
This is for all of you. Why would you recommend that film students hire professional actors versus friends and family? And when casting child actors, what are the rules? Should you audition the parents first before you interview a child? But let's go to the first part. Why would you recommend? We'll start with Courtney.
Sure. So I know when I was in film school, the biggest thing I faced was casting. We just weren't sure where to find professional actors. Like, we would post on Facebook and Craigslist and open calls in like the theater and film buildings, and would not get a good response doing it that way. So we would resort to hiring family members or friends, whether they were actors or not. And yes, that feels super comfortable in that moment. But from my experience, like, I have one example. We were a couple days out from filming when I was working on a student film, and we hadn't filled this one lead role. And my friend, who was not an actress, thought it'd be a really cool experience, really fun opportunity. So I was desperate. I said yes. Bad mistake, because fast forward to the actual shoot date, and I get a text from her while I'm on set saying that she's going to be about an hour or so late. Of course, like, my stomach dropped, because you already know, you've pre-planned out that shoot day. You know exactly when hair and makeup's there, when other cast members are showing up. You've kind of allotted so much time for your scenes, and possibly when you're going to break for lunch. So when your actor doesn't show up, it throws your whole day in the air. So definitely encourage professional actors, because they're going to treat it like a job, whereas a family member or friend is probably going to treat it more as a favor to you and for fun. So highly encourage professional actors.
Maribeth?
Well, if they're professionals, they know what they're doing. Hopefully they've had some experience hitting a mark before. And I really want to encourage students that actors are actually looking for you guys. When we teach actors, all the time, you know, they want to know, how can I get hooked up with schools so I can be in thesis films, so I can get my first experiences on a set and to build my resume. So just to have that awareness. And there's lots of places. There's Actors Access, which is through breakdown services, where you can post, actors can post their headshots and resumes to various projects that you're working on. Definitely Backstage. Playbill Online has job listings. So if you post in the right places, you'll have some success, and you'll have professional actors who've actually had some training.
Allison?
Yeah, it's a commitment. You know, I always get, you know, people who want to do background work and family and friends, and, you know, which is fine, but it's really just long hours, and it can be a real commitment. So although you have that time to observe, which is a great opportunity, but, you know, if they're not professional in doing it, they may not think it's as educational as like you guys would. So it's a commitment, a time commitment.
So this is for you, Courtney. What is casting networks, and how has technology like casting networks changed the way projects are cast? I remember when I was at City and even at NYU, we'd get mail bags of 8x10 pictures. Tell us how that's changed.
Absolutely. So Casting Networks is a software company. We're website based, but we streamline the casting process for casting directors. So same thing with me, actually, Jeff. When I was interning, it was all paper based. Like, actors would drop off their headshots, they'd put it through snail mail. And specifically that one internship where I was doing background, actors would come to the office, and we would take photos of them, and we'd put their photos on an index, like, piece of paper with all their stats, and we would put it in file cabinets in this huge closet. So what's crazy is, like, we would get our breakdown for the shoot day, and I'd go to this closet, and I would just be like shuffling through all of them, trying to figure out, like, oh, this person would fit the bill. And then I'd go back to my desk with a huge stack and just cold call. So yeah, and then actors would also call our office being like, hey, I'm available these days, let me know if there's anything. So there was just a lot of legwork. So technology like Casting Networks has completely changed the game for casting, because something that would have taken me hours then now takes me minutes, like possibly even seconds. Because with Casting Networks, you can post your project, and within literally seconds of posting it, you're going to get submissions. And it's all in front of you at once. You know these people are available because they submitted to that specific project and date. And communication's all done through that as well, meaning, like for example, if a date changes, like a shoot date, the old school way is I'd have to cold call all 100 people to see if they're available for the date change, where with this I can just send a group email and I'm done. So technology has really helped, and we hope to continue to keep changing too.
So this is a question for all three of you, now that we know how a film student can find background actors. What is the hardest part and what is the most rewarding part of your job? Well, we'll start first with Allison.
We were talking a little bit about this before. People. I love people person in general. It's the best part and the hardest part, especially when scheduling and, everybody has their own things they're doing as opposed to, background work. They're also doing maybe commercial work, or if you're in, students in classes. So it could be, I don't know.
Okay, no, well, this is good material that our students will learn
it's good, but
what
it's
you
hard.
like about your job and how difficult it is. Maribeth?
Well, I would say the easiest part of my job is just being in the room with actors every day and learning about the new worlds based on the scripts that we get. So, when we were casting a Todd Haynes feature called Wonderstruck, we were casting a deaf child to be the lead in that film, and so I learned all about deaf culture. Things that I missed in school, historical things, period pieces, you learn on the job. And watching an actor kind of find something new within the script that you hadn't heard before, or you've read 25 actors and then the 26th comes in and gives like a mind-boggling read where you're like, oh, I understand that beat now, I understand this material better, is a really exciting, great part of my job. The hard part of my job is getting true information from agents and managers at times can be really tricky. And a lot of people don't know that casting directors negotiate deals. And so everybody, except the bigger stars, which attorneys handle on the production, but everybody that you see that speaks, I've negotiated that contract. And so sometimes that can get really tricky, and that keeps me up at night. Can I close this deal? Is this person actually going to do this for us?
Courtney?
I'm trying to think of the hard thing. Job's really good. I feel like any kind of office environment coming from casting is a little different because you basically kind of work the 9 to 5. So it's pretty good, but I would say it's like any type of job where like when you're busy, and that's probably the hard. Like pilot season's really hard because we do support casting directors. So they're calling in frantic about things, trying to get things figured out. Actors are calling in. And I'd say the most rewarding is the people. Like with my position at this job, I am able to like come to schools and speak, and I am able to meet with casting directors and go to like lunch or meetings. So it's just the different types of people I'm able to meet is really rewarding.
So we're going to take a few questions now that are coming in from our other NIFS film schools. So could we take the first virtual question? Do you have the microphone? Okay, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Jordan Foster, and I am MEDP 10 student.
Okay, we're going to get a camera on you eventually. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
First, and tell us your first question that just came in.
Okay. This question is for Sharon at Fordham University for everyone on the panel. I heard Spike Lee talk about how Halle Berry auditioned 7 times for Jungle Fever as a crack addict. The first 6 auditions, she smelled too good and then didn't take a bath for a few days and got the part on the 7th edition. How important is it to look the part and smell the part? And isn't it usual to get 7 calls back?
Just chime in, whoever wants to take that.
Whew.
I think they need to smell the part.
No, I prefer you not smell the part. Because we're in very tiny audition rooms with you. But I do think it's part of the actor's job to not wear a costume ever to audition, but to help us imagine what you would look like in the world that we're trying to create. So it's not so much, okay, if I'm going to go and audition for a doctor, I should wear my scrubs. That's actually a pretty green beginner mistake. You can wear something that gives the idea of a doctor and what that might feel like without being too obvious. And in terms of the 7 audition thing, I think that's pretty rare. The one time I've experienced that is when it's a child actor and they're gonna like really have a lot of responsibility to carry a film. And you can't look back at like a demo reel and say, okay, well here's the breadth of their work because they're 7. So then they'll be, we'll put them through more of like a workshop period and really put them through their paces to make sure they're ready to handle that size of role. But for most adults, 1 to 3 auditions is usually the norm.
Okay. We have another question coming in.
This question is from Mark at Ithaca College for everyone on the panel. Green Book, directed by Peter Farrelly, received the Best Picture Oscar at the Academy Awards this weekend. When you cast a New York Italian family, which is a big scene in this film, how do you cast for these roles? Are they really from the Bronx community where the scene takes place? They sound so real.
You want to take that?
So yeah, I can take that. So background-wise, we really do go into the community and find it, whether it's an open call or just, you know, finding a community center or a school, or, you know, we try to go and meet the real people, because that's always what the director wants the real deal, background-wise, and I'm sure it's the same on
Maribeth, you want to?
in principal.
Sure. I mean, in principal casting, first we will try actors who have been trained to do a good New York accent, even if they're not from New York, who have a certain look. You know, our first job is just scrolling through, after we go through our brains for ideas first, we'll go through the headshots that have been submitted from agents and managers and try to match a family. Usually if we've cast the first member of the family or two members, then you try to kind of match physically everyone else that you're going to actually audition to those main family members. And a lot of it is about, can you have the swagger, can you have the New York feel about you, even if you're not from New York. I'm happy to say that we don't do a lot of like in the field casting, although I have, you know, on various occasions gone to, you know, the place in Manhattan where there are a lot of Indian restaurants and taken Polaroids of people in the old days and brought them back to see if we could get a director to cast that person. So it happens, but mostly for us in principal casting, we're going through the agents and managers and the traditional process.
And what a wonderful film that was. It won Best Picture Sunday night at the Oscars. And yeah, that family, they sounded like they lived in the Bronx, you know? We have a third question coming in from another school.
This question is from Ronald at Brooklyn College and is for everyone on the panel. I remember going to an open call in Spike Lee's Black Klansman for an extra part. The only requirement was to show up with a real 1970s afro haircut. Is this a normal thing that casting directors are told to do? And what is one of the most unusual casting calls that you have all participated in?
Who would like to chime in first? Let's do the Spike Lee come to the audition with an afro. Do you think people would bring wigs, or are they allowed to take it?
It happens in background all the time. They're ready to go with whatever they have that fits, you know, the era or the look. If they have their own wig, sometimes it's used on set, you know.
I heard that
It's a
interview,
different
and I mean, I interviewed Spike.
question for a
Spike
principal
said,
versus-
we came into the audition, and he said, we spotted the wigs like that. He says, if they had a wig, they were thrown out of the call.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a?
You know, I think we don't usually, I haven't been to a lot of open calls or done them. I think one of the most fun processes was the kind of the search for deaf talent that we did on that film, just because we learned so much, and you start to appreciate the pilot that we're working on now has an autistic character. And that's been a really good learning experience as well, just to see how talented people are and how we need to kind of create the world as it is. We need to show audiences the world as it is, whether that means diversity in all sorts of forms. So that's been super fascinating.
Okay. Was that the third question? Okay, so we'll go back to the virtual questions and studio audience questions shortly. So this is from Maribeth. Can you take us through the casting process on a film or TV show that you've worked on recently?
Sure. We recently worked on a show for Amazon that was an anthology series, and it was especially tricky because in anthology casting, you're casting a new cast every episode, like completely from scratch. And they came to us and said, okay, we really want a lot of big names to be in this series. So all of our leading roles were people of note and rather large names, and a lot of that is just making idea lists from your brain, using other lists that you've used on things in the past, and that's kind of the first step to put those major players into position. And once you've got the first one in, then it's easier to go to other bigger names and say, well, so-and-so's doing it, and this person's doing it, so this person should also come along. And so we managed to find some really great folks to be in that. And then you start the second tier casting, which is the supporting folks who will help the larger roles along. And then you do the next tier, which is, you know, the 1 or 2 line co-star roles. And you put out breakdowns to the agents and managers, and they submit headshots and resumes to you. You audition every day, all day, and submit tapes, the tapes that you've made at the end of each day. Part of my job is to cut that down. So, you know, I might audition 25 people for a role, but I'm only going to send the best 5 to the showrunner. And he or she will make the decision about who's going to get the role.
Okay. This is for everyone. Background acting, we're talking a lot about it now. Background acting work is a commitment to a long day and very long hours. And as casting directors, you work on many period projects which could require haircuts, facial hair trims, size restrictions. Can you talk about how serious an actor needs to be for these parts? And we'll start with Allison.
And again, it's a commitment. We do ask specifically if you're willing to get a haircut, willing to go to a fitting, and a lot of times that one fitting can lead to a whole season of work on a project. So, I mean, but you have to take into consideration that you're keeping that look during the filming of the project, you know, if you keep getting asked to return as background. So it's an important part of it, but you have to weigh, you know, where you want to do it for what show. But I mean, even shows now that aren't necessarily period projects are asking for specific, you know, hairstyles, and you know, it's always a discussion with the director where they want to do it and how specific it gets with the hair and makeup department.
Maribeth?
So in principal casting, we try to be communicative with hair, especially any specific requests that they have along the way, so we can warn actors, because that's the worst phone call you can get, is someone's on the set on a work day and we need them to cut their hair and they're saying no. And because of SAG regulations, they have a right to say no, actually. So we have to be super communicative, like any style changes, any hair changes that are major. Most people will agree to some sort of like trim or small physical change on set, but it can really limit. We got an audition tape yesterday for a very handsome man, but he had recently shaved his head for a different project. And it took him out of our project because we're shooting in a few weeks, and that really didn't fit the world. If he had hair, you know, it might have been a different story. So it is a serious, thought process for an actor to go through. Am I willing to make that commitment, and how long does it take me to grow something back, I guess?
Yeah.
If I could just add, Richard Price's best-selling novel, first novel, The Wanderers, it was turned into a film by Phil Kaufman. I'll never forget, I was a production assistant on the set, and the casting director said, does anyone want to be in the Fordham Baldies? And a group of kids just ran up and they said, we have to shave your head right now. They went into a trailer. 10 guys, they came out totally bald. One guy's girlfriend was hitting him with a pocketbook. What'd you do? What'd you do? We're going to my sister's wedding in a week. So it's a commitment. If you're going to shave your head.
I think to piggyback on that too is just like, if you're an actor pursuing acting, like casting is going to be super upfront with you about what's going to be asked of you. So just make sure that if you're telling them that yes, I'm willing to cut my hair, that you're willing to actually do that. Because I don't know about you guys, but for me, there's been times where actors would show up to set and I'd get a call from production being like, they're refusing to cut their hair. And that actually falls back on casting. So just make sure if you're promising that you're going to do it, that you are holding that end up.
Yeah.
You know, Courtney, we were talking during our workshop. Could you talk a little bit about what you and Mickey were telling me about the juggler?
Oh yeah, I mean, so it wasn't my firsthand experience, but my friend's friend was casting a juggler like for his production. And on his Casting Network's profile, it did say that he had experience in juggling. And the actor showed up to set and couldn't juggle, and the name of the film was The Juggler.
Oh my
and
God.
so like, it's just like one of those things, like you don't want to be in that position. So just make sure if you're doing acting, to be really upfront with what's being asked.
So this is a question for everyone. How important is it for actors to research the projects they're submitting for? And how important is it for actors to know the types of clothes they own and what props they can provide on a set? And we'll start with Maribeth.
Okay, take that piece by piece. One at a
We'll
time.
do the first one. How
right.
important
That's
is
a
it for actors to research the projects they are submitting for?
Well, that's tricky. I mean, I think everything that we put out on breakdowns is obviously completely legit. So it's a little different in my world. I think it's important once you've got that audition that you're doing research on the people that are a part of the project, because as an actor that can kind of shift how you perform. You need to know what genre you're working within, you need to know how everything sounds. You can always YouTube, or if a series exists, watch a few episodes to see how that series feels and how should you dress for the audition, that kind of thing. So, that's kind of the first piece. But yes, I mean, you don't want to work with shady people, but I don't really know how you necessarily prevent that. I guess go through schools. That there's a support system under those students, so you're not going to crazy places and doing nutty things.
Allison, you want to chime in on that?
Or the second I think it's super important to do research. We do so many projects that are in a certain era, and like you said, the Spike Lee Afro thing, it takes a while to grow an afro. So if you knew that a company was working on it, like Grant Wilfley Casting, you could say, oh, I'm going to grow it out, and prepare yourself for it. And what's totally different than principal casting is having your own wardrobe that you can bring onto a set. That's solely a background thing, and it can help. It's not something we ask everyone to do, because they will head to toe fit you for a certain era, but sometimes it helps. And bringing certain shows these days are so many period projects that sometimes they are asking people to bring basic pants that could go for a couple different eras, or so it's good to have some solid pieces. I get a lot of times I don't have a suit. We're like, how can you not have a basic suit? Or to be like a waiter in a scene, or a featured staff member or something, and it's I don't have you want to have the basics going into, that's definitely background world
But
stuff.
Courtney, you have mentioned that during our workshop that on casting networks, you want extras to tell you what uniforms they have, if they have a police outfit.
Yeah, exactly, because the background casting that use our site can actually search by that too. So it's super important that if you have scrubs, or you have an NYPD uniform, that's important to them to know.
Well, they're usually a police officer, correct?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's the real question. They might be.
NYPD.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's super important to know, like Allison said, the wardrobe that you have, and communicate that with the casting director. And being honest, that's the huge part.
I've totally searched by something.
Yeah.
And casting networks, do they have,
Okay,
there's
specific.
so many categories in there, and you can search by it. It's
Well, just
really
a
awesome.
side note, last year they shot Hugh Jackman's film here, The Greatest Showman, and I was just watching him set up, and I went to a police officer. He had a Cooney police officer badge, and I said, wow, what a great job. You get to go on all this shoots, and you don't have to stay at a Cooney school. And then he just looked around. He said, I'm not a Cooney police officer. I'm an actor.
Yeah.
This is my suit. They gave me the badge. So you don't know who you're talking to,
Sometimes they add the stuff to what you already have, add the patches
Exactly.
and things like that.
Right.
So this is for everyone, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. So the last question for this part of the show is, how important is it to have snapshots, or as opposed to headshots, handy at your audition? And where can an actor get inexpensive and good headshots? I mean, how's this being done these days? In the
snapshots you can take anywhere, everywhere on your phone, send it within. I mean, now we're asking for people, if we're setting them up for a fitting or something, can you send me a quick snapshot? And if they don't do it, it's kind of like,
selfies?
oh, this is background,
Right.
Background.
in the background world.
You're not going to
we
tell
use
Denzel
strictly,
Washington to do
I mean,
that.
no, that's, principle, it's different. They are still using the classic headshot, but in background we are using, we submit them to directors. I mean, directors are like, these are headshots. When I go in to, make a presentation, I have to have a snapshot of what this person is going to come looking like on set. So,
Any other comments about headshots before we take a studio audience question? Okay. Studio audience questions. Who would like to ask one of our casting directors a question? Raise your hand. Yes. Please say your name.
My name is Claude McCammon from Bronx Community College, and this question is actually...
Oh, well, you need the microphone. Right. Could you start again, Claude? I'm sorry.
Yes. My name is Claude McCammon. I'm from Bronx Community College, and this question is for everyone on the panel. This is a two-part question. I read an article that Spike Lee discovered Rosie Perez dancing on a speaker at a party and casted her for Do the Right Thing. Do all actors need to audition, or Are they just right for the part? And the second part is, do actors need to prepare to improvise during an audition, or do they just need to read from the script?
Who would like to chime in
I
on
think
that? Great question.
improv is huge because a lot of times, again, in background, there's a series of featured roles that they don't necessarily want to audition through principal casting. The little things that Maribeth doesn't have time for, you know, like, and it doesn't require necessarily reading off the script. They want to just see how you would react in a scene. So that's huge in background if you're, you know, coming in for an interview or something like that.
And like Allison said earlier about real people too, like example, like you were just saying, I remember I had to go to like clubs to find a go-go dancer, like actually like late at night, went to the clubs with my business card. So yeah, it's one of those things where in background you don't necessarily have to cast. Sometimes you might, if it's very specific, they'll want to do what we call interviews, and it's not really like an audition, it's just more like they want to see that person in person. But for principal, I'm sure it's different.
Great question.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, principals, we're in the audition business. We audition actors every day, and sometimes we love it when actors improv, like kind of secretly, if they're good at it and they can throw a button on something to make it better or funnier or more interesting in transition. But technically, SAG AFTRA doesn't want actors to, and they don't want us to ask you to. Because sometimes people can take an actor's material and use it. We've definitely been in commercial situations before where we're working on a spot, an actor comes in and does a hilarious improv, doesn't get the job, but then when you watch the commercial, their words are being used on the commercial. So SAG AFTRA does have protections against that, but if an actor comes in and offers some improv and that works, happy.
Before we take the next question, I know when I was at Columbia, some of the best material for our short films came from the audition improvs.
Yeah.
We would take note, we videotape, we transcribe, and even if the actor didn't get the part, we put it in.
Yeah.
But it's something to think about, filmmakers. You have the microphone. I guess you have a question. First name?
My name is Ryan from Bronx Community College. I'm a MEDP 10 student. This question is for Maribeth. This is a two-part question. Do all directors come to the casting auditions, or do they just like cast from videotape?
Okay.
And who exactly is everyone that's in the room during the audition?
Sure.
Great question.
Yeah. So more and more directors are not in the room as much. As a casting director, we are the directors that are in the actual room. Once an actor gets to a certain point in the process, if the director is local or if the director just likes to be in the room with the actor, they'll come in and we'll do kind of a final callback session with them. But more and more, you know, a lot of our directors are in Oregon and Rome and all over the world, and so we just send them tapes and they can usually cast off of tape, and they trust us to do our job well, so they can cast off of tape. And what's the second part?
The second one was who exactly is in the casting room during the audition?
We try to make it really comfortable for actors when they come to our office, and so we don't want a lot of extra folks in the room. My rule is that everybody who's in that room has to have a job. A lot of our interns ask, when am I going to be in the audition room? And a lot of that answer is, you know, probably your last day or never. And the reason is because everybody has to have a job. I don't want 3 or 4 people in my room with an actor. I want them to feel super comfortable and not so nervous. It's a nerve-wracking experience. So sometimes it's a casting director and a camera operator, but I run the camera, I read with the actor. I'm a one-man band because I just want everybody to feel relaxed and at home.
So that whole myth on that there's 25 people and 10 producers and 5 writers, it's a very small.
Yeah, it's different when they get to
Group
set. There's the
Right.
there's the group of people.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. Say your first and last name, and nice and loud.
My name is Brianna Cousins. I'm an MEPD student from Bronx Community College, and this question is for Maribeth and Allison. So to play Jake LaMotta in the movie Raging Bull, Robert De Niro famously gained 60 pounds, a feat which many critics call transformative, and set the bar for all actors after him. Did the casting director tell Viggo Mortensen in the movie Green Book that he needed to gain 50 pounds for his role, or can they just wear fat suits? How often does the actor tell the director that they need to do it, gain the weight for themselves to get into the part, and not use costumes?
Great question.
Sure.
And that's for Maribeth, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think some actors are super method, and if you're Viggo Mortensen and you have that level of creative freedom, you can talk to the director and say, do you want me to gain this weight, or are we going to do some kind of padding for me? It's a communication between the director and the actor. The casting director stays far, far away from trying to say anything physical about an actor's appearance. It's our job to subjectively judge an actor as an artist when they're in the room with us, and judge their look. But it is not my job to transform anyone. There are times when I, will say, can you just throw on a little bit more lipstick today, or something like that. But definitely the physical transformation stuff is between an actor and a director.
Yeah, it's a conversation that they have sort of separate from us. But I think it's happening more and more, Actors want to challenge themselves and, want to go there and do something that's like out of what they would be like typecast for.
Yeah.
So.
I know from a lot of the DGA seminars that I attend, a lot of directors will talk about how they give the actor the option. We can pad you up, and the actors don't want to do it. They want to gain the weight. They want to feel the heaviness, the part, especially if it's like the Jake LaMotta, the Raging Bull story. De Niro wanted to feel and look like Jake LaMotta when he had that weight gain. So he gained 60 pounds. We have another, we switched the mic. We have another question for the gentleman in the back. Just microphone, and please say your first and last name.
Yeah, my name is Antonio Rodriguez. I am in MEDP 36 here. I'll be graduating this year. I understand that you all work with SAG AFTRA, but I'm wondering about your own unions. I think this would be 52, if I'm correct. But I would love to know a bit about how that played a role in finding your way into this niche of the industry.
So it's a good question, because what union are you guys in? I think that's
background casting
background
is always still trying to,
I was trying to get
in there.
I know, you deserve to be there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Principal casting we're local, Teamster Local 817. And I think it's casting directors and beverage drivers, which is makes for a fascinating Teamster meeting. But the Teamsters are amazing. We're so lucky to be supported by them, and we owe so much to Tom O'Donnell and his staff and Terry Castelletta for making our lives easier. Our health insurance is wonderful and reasonably priced, and it's a really, really good support system. If we ever have an issue with a contract, we call our rep, and she is right on the phone getting into it, and she helps bring us together too. It's great to be a Teamster.
You know what, we're going to save questions for the next segment of the show. I have a question for Courtney. Courtney, how can student filmmakers sign up for a free Casting Networks account, and what is the process of creating and posting a project on Casting Networks?
So it's really easy, and I feel like there's this myth going around that film students can't use Casting Networks, and anyone that's looking to cast a film can. You just go to castingnetworks.com and you go to industry and then student filmmaker, and you just create your basic account. And then from there you fill out your project information, so the basic, like what type of project is this, your synopsis that you've worked on in class, and then you create a role description for each character that you're looking to cast. And then the final step for us, though, is there is a submit for approval button, and that's just going to send your project to a member of our team, and we're going to review it to just make sure it sounds good, there's no questions we have, because if we have questions, more than likely the actor is going to have questions. So that's the process, and we'll reach out to you if we have any questions. It doesn't mean you're in trouble or there's anything bad. We're just looking to really help you in that process, and then we'll let you know once it's approved, and then you'll start to receive submissions.
Great. And many of our students use Casting Networks for their thesis films, and thank you again for continually being available to have these workshops at Bronx Community College.
Thank you for having me.
So this is a question for everyone. In Elia Kazan's autobiography, A Life, he talks about working with actors like Marlon Brando, Marilyn Monroe, James Dean. And he talks about how Kazan would invite actors he thought were right for a part, invite them to his home and walk around the block a few times. That was his audition process. Do you find that some directors cast roles the same way today, not just in the casting room? And just chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I think, directors want, if a role is big enough, and maybe it's more the opposite way, that an actor kind of wants to get to know the director at a certain level and figure out, is this a project that I want to sign on to? That happens a lot when it's maybe a first or second time director. the director kind of needs to go and meet with that person and kind of sell the project and sell themselves really to that actor. In terms of kind of non-traditional casting methods, sure. I mean, I think, you know, you can ask actors to kind of physically do things in the room, to kind of act out a bit more than we would ever do kind of from a casting day-to-day perspective, to physicalize the scene a little bit. I was doing a callback with a child yesterday, and we really did like a full workshop. Normally I would never use props or anything in a just a day-to-day audition, but there were keys, we did blocking. We really tried to help that actor along in a non-traditional method get that job.
Anyone else want to comment on?
Again, in background,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of non-traditional stuff going on. Like if they're filming a scene and, you know, there is a line that isn't necessarily cast, you know, it's really just a feel for what somebody's already doing on set. And, oh, hey, bring that person over and let me talk to them for a minute and maybe they'll say a line.
So
or,
Allison,
you know what happens.
is there a myth that if you get put on as a day player, as an extra, and someone says, you know what, we just added an extra line, you're getting the line?
Oh, it happens all the time.
So will that day player now get a chance to join the union for that one line?
I mean, they could get offered a waiver, a SAG AFTRA waiver, which is sort of a whole separate conversation, but that's sort of a notch in their belt towards joining. So, yeah, it could be.
Will the production company pay their membership fee?
No. No. The member will always pay for their own. Unless it's some special.
Does anyone know what the going rate is now to join the Screen Actors Guild?
I'd say it's
Approximately
24.
Oh, I was going to say more. I was going to say like I think it's like 3,200 or something.
Okay, I was going to say 2,400. It's gone up.
Okay, okay, that's your initiation.
Somewhere between 24 and 32.
That's your initiation fee.
Yeah.
So here's a question for everyone. If a student filmmaker knows they're wrapping at 1 a.m. in the morning, how important is it to be transparent to their background actors regarding all the call times, arrival and closing, wrapping for the night?
Well, that's like gold information for a background casting director. If I can tell the actors, you're going to be there, you know, at 10 a.m., but you're going to, you know, stay until 2 a.m. You know, it's just so much more helpful. They can think ahead and, you know, make arrangements for the SAG members. They get, you know, the safety ride back to, you know, wherever it is in the city. So it helps tremendously on background, but a lot of times we don't know that information until it's set the night before when they wrap on set. So it's hard to predict in background.
Maribeth?
Well, I just want to say that open communication is always great because you want happy people on your set, I assume. Yeah. Student filmmaker or not, you want good people who really want to be there. And everybody, you know, who's a part of this industry is usually pretty hungry to be there, but you need to treat your actors, background or principal, just as people. I think sometimes it's easy to forget. I just heard a story about a principal actress who was asked to go out in the freezing cold, in the very freezing cold weather we've had here in New York City, in not a lot of clothing. And she knew her rights and declined. And so they found a background person to do it. And I thought, that poor background person, like that is, you know, the back of that woman's head is worth it to that person to be freezing cold. So people will always do things, but make sure you're careful with what you're asking, because those are actual people with parents and lives, and just be communicative.
Yeah. I just want to add, I was an extra. Remember Walter Hill's film, The Warriors? The gang movie? 1,000 people in 92nd Street Park every night, midnight to 5 in the morning, midnight to 5 and they would raffle off every night for 7 nights at 5 in the morning a 25-inch color TV set.
Yeah, we still do that.
Really?
I mean, you know, it's when it's big back-to-back days to keep people
What do they raffle off these days?
Oh, it's the same type of stuff.
Yeah, but now it's a
like,
plasma TV.
Yeah, it's just a bigger TV.
I used to get a kick at these heavy tube sets. People would carry them
It's
on
rare.
the subway. Like, would you just ship it to my home? No, you got to take it now.
Yeah.
Carrying these heavy TVs every night.
Yeah.
I wish I won one of those sets.
It just keeps, you know, keeps it fun and keeps people coming back. We're doing the raffle tomorrow night, so, you know.
That's great to know. So next time you get an extra cast, if you get an extra part or as a background player,
it could be a thing.
you could win.
You too could win a
60-inch TV. Yeah. We have another virtual question coming in from another film school. And say your name again, too, so we know who you are.
My name is Jordan Foster. Yes.
Hold on, Jordan. We got to wait till the camera gets to you. Now you can say it again. Go ahead.
Hello, guys. My name is Jordan Foster. So this question is from Jose at Hostos Community College and is for everyone on the panel. This is a two-part question. In the movie Dumb and Dumber, I read that they cast 150 actors.
How many?
150.
Okay.
Actors until Jim Carrey got the part. When directors write a part for a big Hollywood actor and they're not available, is this the normal process for casting for a major role?
I would quit after about 12. I think that figure's a little off. But you know, at the beginning of every process, if you're trying to find the bigger leads for your film, which were often the first, principal casting directors are often the first on the ground in a feature to try to attach people to get the rest of the feature even greenlit. So through that process, we're just making idea lists from our brains, trying to put down plenty of options. And then the director kind of will pick 10 to 15 options that they feel creatively drawn to. We check that person's availability to make sure that they're around when we want to shoot. People who are well known in this industry are busy, and they're booked out years in advance. So then you take the list of people that are available and you kind of try to encourage directors to make a list of 2 or 3 per part that you really feel creatively passionate about. And then you offer it to one person, and if they pass or become not available, you go down the line. But yeah, 150 people is like, that's way too many people to try. But yes, that is usually the process.
Did you have a second part to that
Yes,
question?
this is
Yeah.
the second
Let's go back to, hold on, let's do the cameras on you. What's the second part of the question?
My second question is, do casting directors narrow down the field of actors before they present the best actors to the director for the part?
That's the job. Yeah, that's the whole job. I mean, not the whole job, but yes, we audition a lot of people that the director and producers don't see. Just because usually it's not a talent issue. We have so many beautiful, talented New York actors. So it's not that somebody necessarily wasn't good enough, but that they're not right for the part. Sometimes I feel like in certain levels of roles of auditioning, it's kind of like a job interview in that within the first 5 to 10 seconds, I know whether or not they're going to get the job. And sometimes it's only one line, so the audition is 5 to 10 to 15 seconds. But yes, that is our job, to winnow down the population and only send the best to the directors and producers.
Great
And we
question.
do the same background-wise. You know, it may be as opposed to auditions, you know, we're submitting what this club scene would look like, and you're, you know, weeding out people that are, you know, you think are not exactly right for this, or maybe they're right for another scene. So it's all, we're like the in-between to do that weeding out before it gets to the director to see if we're on the same page.
You know, I was reading recently in Carry On's film, in Roma, that he wanted to cast, I believe, I hope I'm not getting the articles mixed up, but you know, he wanted children like between 3 and 5, and he cast kids between 8 and 10 because there was different Screen Actor Guild.
You know, there's only certain hours
limits,
they
right.
can work.
Do you find that happens a lot, that they have to increase the age of the child because?
Yeah,
I
in
mean,
background.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Anything with twins you can talk about? I hear.
We are asked for twins all the time
Really?
because of the work hours. Yeah. Just,
Okay.
I mean, and you know, when, especially if they're very
Could you
small
explain that
kids.
to our film students,
Yeah,
how that works?
it's sort of a weird little niche in the business. If you have somebody, a principal character who has a child, often, you know, infants can only be on camera. It's literally like, you know, 15-minute intervals or something. That may even be wrong, but it's something very specific. So you sort of switch out the baby. So, you know, if one's fussy, you can use the other one. And, you know,
So
so
that's
we
a
use
little
identical
hint.
twins, some
Okay.
even triplets. Because
Triplets?
that's like, yeah, there's one of our productions is asking for triplets, and it's, you know, I'm like friends on Facebook with all these, you know, mom twin groups. I'm like, I don't have kids, but, you know, you have to reach out and see who's.
Well, talking about kids, in the same article, he talks about, or it was a podcast, that some parents will grill the kids a night before and sort of how they want them to act. And the director, he picked up on it, and he just was very upset. I mean, do you talk to the parents before you cast the kids? I mean, do they stay out of the picture? Maribeth?
No, I think, you know, we kind of moderate parent behavior in the lobby of our office. You know, if a kid is great and perfect and they have a not so wonderful parent, they're probably still going to get the job. But for certain, you know, we really want to make a very happy set experience for our directors, and part of that is knowing the personalities of the parents alongside the child, because the parents are on set with them all day, every day, and are they going to create issues that the child has no concept of? And are they going to do the right thing in protecting their own child when they're on set? So yeah, I mean, we definitely, if a kid does a great job, I'll always go out to the lobby, I'll introduce myself to mom or dad. I make sure to tell every child that auditions, even if they, you know, didn't know their lines and were kind of stinky. I'll always say, go out and tell your mom you did an amazing job today and I thought you were charismatic and good. Because I know as soon as they walk out, the parent's first question is, how did you do? And the first question should always be, was it fun? Did you have a good time? But it's rare.
So, which brings me to the next question. Our students, when they audition through casting networks, a lot of times, is there some sort of template information you can tell our film students? What do you say to someone that comes to the Bronx from Connecticut to read for 10 minutes? I know I was listening to Spike Lee once mention, he always says, you know, thank you very much for coming. We will get in touch with you, we appreciate it. But then he talks about how he actually auditioned the director of Star is Born, Bradley Cooper. Didn't even realize he told him to leave for a part in one of his films, you know, 10 years earlier. Is there something in particular that students should say or shouldn't say when someone's leaving? I mean, they might get their hopes up too high that if they say, we'll call you back soon. Maribeth?
We're very careful with what we say to actors, because actors really do take our word as Bible a little bit, and they shouldn't, everything with a grain of salt. But it is very important as students that you are very kind to your actors, that you create a warm and welcoming space. I say the word great about 1,000 times a day, because everybody that comes into audition is great in some way, and that they were brave enough to bring their art to us, whether that's 1 line or 27 lines or whatever it is. You did a great job. Thank you so much. Being grateful. You know, you don't know where they've come from. Oftentimes we'll audition somebody and at the end they'll say, thank you so much. Like, I flew in from Florida, and you just cringe. You know, people really want opportunities in this business and will do whatever it takes. There's a real hunger. And so you have to respect that hunger. And even if you're feeling tired or under-caffeinated or what the case may be, it's my job to create a very warm, welcoming environment for them. And I wouldn't ever talk about, you know, we'll talk to you soon about next steps. We'll talk to you, you know, we'll be calling you soon, or like try to give them winky kind of hints that they might have gotten the job, because something can change like that. All of a sudden the showrunner decides, oh, I want a different, I want a female instead of a male now. And you've just told that person that they did a great job and winked at them that they might get the job. So you want to be really careful. That is very valuable information for our students, so thank you. We'll take another question from the audience because we're going to be wrapping up soon, but this is a question for Allison. Can volunteering your time and talents get you in the door at a casting agency, and how important is it to get to know the talent pool and start that process before you get a paid position? Many of our students who have to take an internship class want to work at a casting agency. Yeah, internships are, I mean, there's an intern at almost every office I've been in, and I mean, it's a huge part of it. I don't think you have to know, in background world, I don't think you have to know the full talent. It's such a huge database of different types and stuff. For what we do, there's no way to know before you get a position. You just have to sort of be ready to learn once you get thrown in there, because it's constantly changing. You know, people who do background work this year may not do it next year. Maybe they're on to commercial work. Maybe they're doing principal work, you know, so it's constantly changing. So, anyone else want to chime in on that? Maribeth? I just think you have to be super hungry and ready to hustle. I guess that's the best preparation. And to kind of know your place, I would say. I think that comes up more and more, that interns in our office kind of, we teach them as much as we can, and we really encourage them to be flies on the wall and to eavesdrop as much as they can while keeping our information confidential. But as an intern, your job is, at least for us, it's to answer the phone. It's to learn who all the agents and managers are that we speak with every day, to learn who the directors and the producers are, to look them up on IMDb Pro if you don't know who someone is, and to listen, and just absorb as much as you can. And the better you do, the more we'll trust you with. And it's a professional office environment, so dress is important. Professional office, behavior, I would say, those are great preparations.
Yeah, confidentiality is a big one. That's, you know, we sign confidentiality agreements when we read a script. And, if there's an intern in there, and, we all talk about the business and, the Oscars, and, if we know something that's coming up, or, you could get into leaking that information out, and it's a big deal.
Must be very hard
we want people we can trust and who,
Must be very hard to hold back, information like that. Yeah.
Sometimes.
We're going to take another question from our studio audience. Do we have another question from someone in our studio audience? Please raise your hand up high. Yes. Microphone. Come a little closer, please. Thank you.
Yeah, just be interested to see what your favorite casting decision was. I mean, also from the background, like what was the most unique background actor you have to have found?
Who would like to chime in on that?
Okay, so I did a film called Shutter Island in Boston. I was able to go there, and
Martin
they actually
Scorsese film.
Scorsese. There was a scene, if you've seen it, that is Dachau. And if it didn't look right, he wasn't going to shoot it. His obviously. I mean, it's Martin Scorsese, and like you said, with the shaved heads and very thin-framed background, it was just a very intense process to, first of all, find the people, but also to, just put it together. We even did it to where we did it before they shot it on camera. We set it up, and he came and looked at it, and thank God it was good. But that was probably the most intense, just for finding that specific type, and it's such a intense emotional part of the process. So that's probably my best.
Maribeth?
Specific.
I don't know that I have a specific favorite, but I do think it's always such a joy when our directors are in the rooms with us, especially kind of the more legendary ones, and just watching them work and how they speak to actors, because it is different than what we do in the room every day, I think. So that's always a real pleasure, is watching, and I feel like I get better at my job when I watch people who are excellent at their jobs do theirs. And so just being in the rooms with some of these amazing filmmakers is really an honor.
Well, this is the last question before we wrap it up, and this is for you, Maribeth. Background casting takes a lot of patience and a respect for acting in general. If you're interested in acting but don't want to be an actor, is this a good place to start as a background actor?
If I could probably take that.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Allison, take that.
Yes.
Yes, it is. The myth is, does it lead to principal acting? Right. And they are very different things. Sometimes it can, sometimes it's a very separate thing. There's a huge community of people in New York City that just do background, and they have all the outfits and all the stuff, and they're very reliable, but they don't necessarily go into like Maribeth's world, So it can sort of lead there. It could be something that, or background work could be something that in between the principal jobs could keep it, keep your insurance.
Of course.
But then again, some projects, if they see someone in the background, they won't necessarily bring them in to audition principal-wise. So it's different, on specific projects.
Well, similar to what you said earlier, too, about just like being on set, you learn so much. And I feel like that's a great opportunity, because you're starting to learn terminology on set. You're like, hit my mark. What is that? Like, you're hearing them say that to principal casting, and then you're like, oh, okay, they're physically hitting a mark. Like, they're walking to it. Like, there's things that you learn on set. So I think that's super beneficial to be a background actor. Yeah.
Well, this is great. We can do a part 2 to this show. There's just so much to discuss, but thank you very much. So our time has come to an end, and we'd like to thank our distinguished panelists for taking the time to talk to us today, and what an insightful conversation this was. And I'd also like to thank the New York Governor's Office of Motion Picture and Television Development, the New York Production Alliance, the New York Film and Television Student Alliance, and our studio TV crew from the Media and Digital Film Club here at Bronx Community College. See you next time on Open Doors. Great. waiting to see when our mics get killed.